Go ahead.
Thank you for joining us for our Rockford Campus Town Hall to provide our recommendations for how to improve diversity and inclusion on our campus. So we will be presenting today our roadmap for diversity and inclusion at the University of Illinois College of Medicine, Rockford. This is the hard work and efforts from our ad hoc committee on diversity and inclusion. Hi, I am Dr. Alisa Jones, and I'm serving as the Interim Assistant Dean for Diversity and Inclusion. And I co-chair the ad hoc committee, as well as Dr. Hannah Hinkle, who is the Associate Director of the National Center for Rural Health Professions. June 2020, our original dean, Alex Stagnero-Green, formed an ad hoc committee on diversity and inclusion. And the purpose of this committee was to address racism, discrimination, and bias on our campus, to support the university-wide commitment to improve diversity and inclusivity. And our medical students, especially our underrepresented minority students and allies, after the killing of George Floyd, voiced their concerns and expressed the need to address diversity and equity and inclusion at our university as well as our campus. The ad hoc committee on diversity and inclusion was comprised of our campus students, residents, staff, and faculty. And the charge of this committee was to assess the culture of our campus as it relates to racism, discrimination, and bias, to provide specific recommendations, including strategies in the short-term, intermediate, long-term goals towards improving the culture at our campus. And we wanted to make sure that we recommend a process by which our campus can evaluate the success in accomplishing the identified goals and create a plan of sustainability. So we've had great diversity projects and programs in the past, but oftentimes once grant funding ends, the program ends, or if our faculty leave our campus, then the program leaves with that faculty. So this was really an important part of our recommendations and process.
So the Ad Hoc Committee on Diversity and Inclusion was really part of a broader effort also established at the College of Medicine with the Anti-Racism Urgent Action Committee. The Anti-Racism Urgent Action Committee really demonstrated a systems level approach to addressing racism. It was a partnership, as I mentioned, with the UIC College of Medicine and the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, led by the Associate Dean for Diversity and Inclusion, Dr. Gloria Elam. Multiple committees with members representing UICOM campuses were included as part of this work. And the goal was really to provide recommendations across the UICOM system, again, specifically focusing on racism. So here's a demonstration of the structure of the Anti-Racism Urgent Action Committee. Of course, you can see at the top, it's led by the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, but it was establishing subcommittees that were really focused on specific topics and themes, including the student learning environment, resident recruitment and concerns, student faculty staff recruitment and retention, faculty staff development, and faculty staff in terms of the environment. This was across campus, and we also were focusing on the external impact of policies, procedures, and activities that would influence our community partnerships as well. The medical school curriculum is also key in this effort, and looking at ways that we could improve information and education around racism, discrimination, and bias to our student learners. The structure really included the subcommittees, like we mentioned ours, the Ad Hoc Committee on Diversity and Inclusion, but also the other campus committees, which would be the Peoria's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force and Urbana's Racial Reform and Social Justice Task Force. For the purpose of our committee, we adopted some of those subcommittee themes, but we also included things that were unique to our campus at the College of Medicine, Rockford. So we included the Student Learning Environment, Student Faculty Staff Recruitment and Retention Committee, the Resident Recruitment and Concerns Committee. Faculty Staff Environment was also included, but unique to our own organization here for the Ad Hoc Committee on Diversity and Inclusion was the Assessment and Evaluation Subcommittee. And we felt strongly that we needed to have a specific committee focused on assessment and evaluation to be able to sort of guide the subcommittees to a standard process for evaluation, establishing timeframes, and really having a lead person from that subcommittee on assessment and evaluation help these subcommittees understand how and why we need to have specific and measurable goals and objectives associated with our recommendations. We also included system-wide representation on the External Impact Committee, the Medical Curriculum Committee, and Faculty Staff Development. So we used adapted framework to be able to move this work forward from the ad hoc committee perspective. We recognize that racism, discrimination, and bias all fall under public health issues, and we felt that our framework needed to represent this public health response. So we adopted this framework called Mobilizing for Action Through Planning and Partnerships. It's most often utilized in a local public health system where they bring together multiple sectors of community members to review data, policies, and procedures, and then develop shared recommendations based on feedback and perspectives of their own discipline and sectors that they represent. So we tried to, again, simulate this strategy for the purpose of the Ad Hoc Committee for Diversity and Inclusion. It's really a community-driven strategic planning process at its core, and it worked really well for the purpose of the Ad Hoc Committee. Mobilizing for action through planning and partnerships really helps also apply, I think, a strategic planning process to prioritize different issues. And that's why I think it was so well received among our subcommittee members, because everybody sort of came to the table with their unique perspectives on the priority issues that impacted their roles. And then we're able to work together to identify those priority recommendations that we'll share a little later in this presentation. For the MAP process, there's actually 6 phases, including organizing, visioning, assessment, strategic issues, goals and strategies, and the action cycle. And we adopted all of those phases into the work that we've done through the Ad Hoc Committee. And now we're moving into the action cycle phase. So in order to do this work, we used a number of data sources. We had evaluation results from the student clerkships through the Department of Medical Education and Evaluation, the UICOM-R 2015 strategic plan, the AAMC Medical School graduation questionnaire from 2019 on the individual campus report, the student trainee climate survey of 2020 that Dr. Jones will be sharing more information with you about. And then we also received valuable feedback and perspectives from the Student Committee of Diversity and Inclusion, the Rockford Medical Student Council, the Latino Medical Student Association, the Student Medical National Association, and report recommendations from the subcommittees of the Ad Hoc CDI.
All right, thank you, Dr. Hinkle. So I'll talk to you about the Student Trainee Climate Survey that we developed in fall of 2020. So the Assessment and Evaluation Subcommittee developed this survey, and the purpose was to assess the experiences of current students and trainees as it relates to racism, discrimination, and bias during their time at University of Illinois College of Medicine, Rockford, to provide an opportunity to share experiences and provide ideas such as to improve diversity and inclusion, and inform the ad hoc committee development of recommendations for the campus. So when we were developing this tool to be used for our campus, we talked to student representatives, and many of the students are really excited to participate in this survey because they wanted an opportunity to express what they've been experiencing as it relates to racism, discrimination, and bias. But then we had other students who were less excited. And in fact, they were concerned because they didn't want to feel pressure to relive experiences of racism, discrimination, and bias. And then we had some students who were just feeling a survey overload and did not want to complete an extensive survey. So we, had multiple discussions, and we found a way to sort of meet in the middle, so that we were not re-traumatizing students, and we were giving them and empowering them to express what they wanted to express. And if they didn't want to, they weren't required to do so. So what we ended up doing was developing a brief survey based on the tools that Dr. Hinkle described. And we added some qualitative questions, so that, and these are open-ended questions, so that if students wanted to express what they've experienced as it pertains to racism, discrimination, and bias, they could do so, or they didn't have to. And so we included two questions, one asking them about those type of experiences if they wanted to share, and then also any recommendations, suggestions, ideas on how to improve diversity and inclusion on our campus. We provided an online anonymous survey through the use of Qualtrics, which is the standard online survey tool that we use through our university. And this survey tool was sent to our medical students in the second, third, and fourth year. We did not include first-year medical students because at the point in which we disseminated this survey, they were not involved, at our institution. And we also included our medical biotechnology students, as well as our family medicine residents, and that's our only residency program on our campus. And then we also included postdoctoral students as well. We gave them about a 2-week time frame to complete the very brief survey. So we had a total of 99 responses. So this is the demographic breakdown of individuals who completed the survey. So primarily we had medical students that completed the survey, but we also had other trainees represented as well. Primarily Asian and white students and trainees participated. We had a small number of African American and American Indian students that participated. And because of those small numbers in each of those ethnic racial categories, we decided to combine responses and create a category specifically underrepresented minority status. And this was a way also to protect the identities of these individuals. We had majority female students, and the majority of student trainees were between the ages of 20 and 25. Now, oftentimes with research or survey data, individuals that prefer not to say are often excluded from analyses, but we decided to keep that category of individuals in our data because we wanted to be mindful and sensitive to the fact that maybe students and trainees may not want to identify themselves based on how they responded to the questions in the survey. And so we still wanted to present those results. So let me now present the results of the survey. So there is a more detailed summary in our roadmap report. So I'm just going to provide some of the most important results that we found. Underrepresented minority students were 4 times as likely to report direct experiences of racism, discrimination, and bias. And these are some of the behaviors that they were asked to respond to. So underrepresented minority students were more likely to report denial of opportunities for training or rewards due to race, ethnicity, more likely to report feeling ignored, excluded from group activities, receiving negative offensive behaviors based on personal characteristics other than race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity. Underrepresented minority students were more likely, in comparison to white students, trainees, to report public embarrassment and humiliation, derogatory comments, or behaviors. We also asked students and trainees about witnessing other students, trainees, experiencing behaviors that represented racism, discrimination, and bias. So students, trainees reported witnessing other students experiencing racially, ethnically offensive remarks, names, insults, jokes, witnessing others being publicly embarrassed, publicly humiliated, and others receiving derogatory comments or behaviors. So we looked at the qualitative responses on our survey. And oftentimes with qualitative research, it's important to have two people coding the data to reduce bias. And so myself, I was a coder and self-identified as an underrepresented minority. And Dr. Chris Zimmerman was the second coder who represented as a non-underrepresented minority. And so we analyzed the data separately, coded the data, and then we met with our assessment and evaluation subcommittee, went through our findings, and any discrepancies were resolved through discussion. So these are the themes that popped up when we analyzed the qualitative responses. Many students expressed wanting an increase in student faculty diversity, wanted mandatory training, and increased oversight of faculty and preceptors. They wanted more faculty and staff development, implementation of an anti-racism curriculum for students. Many students represented a need for safe and inclusive classrooms that included use of bystander training. So when they witness other students experiencing racism, discrimination, and bias, but not knowing how to respond. And they really thought it was important to address the diversity and inclusion needs of our campus without overtaxing underrepresented minorities and other marginalized trainees to do so. And they felt it was important to identify protocols in the clinical setting to address patient racism, discrimination, and bias. So based on our review of historical data, historical information from previous evaluations and surveys, our climate survey, and the work of our subcommittees, we were able to identify 10 priorities to improve diversity and inclusion on our campus. And so we will provide those recommendations and priorities, also highlight some specific Rockford campus priorities, and then we'll provide some current progress in some of these areas. And again, a detailed description of our recommendations are provided in our roadmap for diversity and inclusion report. So priority one. And a lot of this work came out of our assessment and evaluation subcommittees. So we'll sort of highlight sort of where that discussion took place, or majority of that discussion took place. So priority one was to establish a sustainable committee structure related to ongoing diversity and inclusion efforts. So while led by Dean Stagnero Green, developing the ad hoc committee on diversity and inclusion, we recognize really throughout this process how important it would be to have a committee that was sustainable, ongoing, and to really make sure that we push these, our efforts forward. And so developing a diversity, equity, and inclusion advisory council with the mission of proactively advancing the mission of the University of Illinois College of Medicine, Rockford in the diversity and inclusion efforts, advising the Office of the Regional Dean, and really allowing us to partner with the different departments, student council, and organizations to ensure an inclusive campus community where individuals are valued and empowered to reach their highest potential. And this council would also be involved in monitoring progress, monitoring success, and really, developing new goals and new opportunities for diversity and inclusion. Priority 2. And so this work came out of this faculty staff environment subcommittee, student learning environment subcommittee. And it was to identify the reporting of mistreatment as it related to discrimination, racism, and bias. So we've had a lot of conversations in terms of, how do you report mistreatment? And oftentimes, especially the students were reporting that it was, they really didn't get feedback on what happened once a behavior was reported. And so really trying to identify ways to close the loop. So this is an important area of focus for our campus. Priority 3, and the work of priority 3 came out of faculty staff environment, student learning environment. And it was to increase knowledge and awareness of resources and treatment options for behavioral health needs of students and faculty on campus and expand campus-based services. So while we have some behavioral health services that exist on our campus, by and large, there was a strong interest in expanding those services and also expanding outreach so that all those on our campus community would be aware of current existing services, but then also adding on as needed for our campus. Priority 4, that work came out of the student learning environment primarily, which was to assess basic needs of students that include food, housing, and clothing, and really do this on a regular basis. So we had quite a number of discussions related to the needs of our students and recognizing how COVID-19, the pandemic, has negatively impacted our students, especially our underrepresented minority students. And we really felt it was important to make sure that we are monitoring these type of issues so that we can address them as quickly as possible. Priority 5. This work came out of the medical curriculum subcommittee. This was to implement curriculum-based changes as part of the system-wide committee recommendations, because when making changes to our curriculum, these are going to be cross-campus changes, not Rockford only. Dr. Hinkle.
Sure. So for priority 6, that was coming from the faculty, staff, student, resident recruitment and retention subcommittee. And it's really looking to assess current policies and procedures around recruitment and retention efforts of underrepresented minorities to our campus. For priority 7, the student learning environment, we're looking at establishing long-term education and training to faculty, staff, and community preceptors on racism, discrimination, and bias. The Rockford College of Medicine is really unique as we have a number of faculty preceptors located outside of the Rockford region. And so we want to make sure that we're continually engaging those preceptors as well in any training efforts that we might undertake. For priority 8, under the faculty, staff, recruitment, and retention, we're looking to create a centralized database to foster inclusiveness of the search process when recruiting URM faculty and staff. This really came through conversations of this subcommittee, but we also engaged our HR department as well in identifying ways that we could best attract and recruit underrepresented minority faculty and staff from a number of different listservs and organizations. And so we're moving that effort forward in a more formalized process under priority 8. For priority 9, the external impact subcommittee, wanted to create a centralized database to increase community partnerships related to diversity and inclusion. We have a number of really strong partnerships, again, throughout the state of Illinois, focused on diversity and inclusion, but we want to use this opportunity to enhance and expand those partnerships where we can. And then priority 10 is looking at the under the assessment and evaluation committee, looking to do strategic planning around diversity and inclusion. We referenced the 2015 Rockford strategic plan, but we feel that, you know, this would be an effort that's really focused more on the needs and continuing the action process and the action cycle for the ad hoc committee work through a strategic planning process that's focused exclusively on diversity and inclusion. So we mentioned earlier that this is all part of more of the broader work done by the Anti-Racism Urgent Action Committee. So when that committee convened with their recommendations, we shared our priorities, but then also identified areas that there might not have been necessarily overlap between what was decided at the Anti-Racism Urgent Action Committee level and what was decided more locally through our ad hoc CDI. So these 5 recommendations here are really the focus areas of our campus that don't necessarily align with any other similar type of effort through the Anti-Racism Urgent Action Committee. So one is to increase the number and access to Black and Brown mental health therapists. This is something that we continually talk with our student health and other campus liaisons in Chicago and elsewhere to make sure that we have representation for Black and Brown mental health therapists and for our students as well who are accessing these services, that they feel represented. The second point here, to assess and address the basic needs of students, as Dr. Jones mentioned, you know, we recognize through conversations in this process that COVID-19 has had an impact on a number of different topic areas related to more of the social environment of our students. And we want to make sure that we're aware of those issues and then also responsive to our student needs related to this assessment. Point 3, the Rockford specific internal funding for scholarship and research. We recognize that this is an area that we want to continue to develop and expand. We want to be able to support our URM students when we're recruiting them to become students on our Rockford campus. And we also want to make sure that they have research opportunities, again, with the focus of representation, having URM faculty available to help support students throughout their research development. And this is sort of captured in point number 3. We also want to develop pipeline programs to improve recruitment and retention of URM students. This is looked at in terms of 2 definitions of pipeline. One is a pipeline that's necessarily looking at, supporting the academic development of students prior to getting into medical school. Right now, we have a relationship in Chicago where our students would participate in pipeline programs through Chicago, but it's not necessarily Rockford based. And we want to make sure that we have, an opportunity to investigate the best ways that we can bring those pipeline programs to Rockford. The other sense of the definition of pipeline programs would be those recruitment programs, those early development programs to create awareness of health professions opportunities for students who are from underserved and underrepresented backgrounds, and really help provide early mentorship and education and awareness to those students, so they can really recognize the opportunities that the health professions have for a future career, and then also support those students as they develop through their educational pathway to get into medical school, pharmacy school, public health, or whatever health profession program they're interested in. We do have really robust pipeline programs throughout our campus community in Rockford, but we feel that it's also important that we sort of centralize those efforts as well so that we can make sure that we're leveraging resources, utilizing funding, and we, are making sure that we're capturing all the different needs that we recognize throughout the state when we're talking and interacting with students from URM and underserved backgrounds. The final Rockford specific priority here that was identified was to provide in-person student, resident, staff, faculty diversity, and associated trainings. We recognize that this training conversation is ongoing from the college-wide level to the all campuses, all regional campuses, but we also want to make sure that we have sort of a personalized touch, especially as we said, we have a number of community faculty preceptors that practice outside of the Rockford region, and we want to make sure that those preceptors feel included and engaged in the process of training. And so we want to make sure that we have that opportunity for in-person training and learning across all sectors of our campus community.
So I wanted to just share some progress that we've made, recognizing that the work of the ad hoc committee was a 6-month process. So, we mobilized very quickly, and it was, just exciting and very optimistic to see so many individuals who really support improving diversity and inclusion on our campus. So a lot of hard work and time and effort that was put into this, but still a very short period of time. So I just want to share some progress, and we'll continue to make progress and provide updates. So the first priority that I discussed was developing a Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Advisory Council, a standing committee. So we have submitted this proposal, and we'll be sending invitations for individuals who will be represented on this council. There's also been some progress made in terms of developing anti-racism curriculum across the campuses. So the anti-racism curricular tutor program was developed, and primarily Dr. James, Richards, Elam, Hyman, and Hanks have been actively involved in these efforts. And the purpose of the tutor program, anti-racism curriculum tutor program, is to train medical students to serve as peer-to-peer educators and mentors in the shared work of dismantling internalized, interpersonal, and institutional racism in the University of Illinois College of Medicine community. So they've been working really hard and have been actively involved in developing this curriculum, identifying medical students, as well as faculty tutors for this program. And so students went through an application process to be a representative for each of the campuses as an ARC tutor. So I want to just take a moment to acknowledge our Rockford campus representatives. So congratulations to Corey, Naomi, Emily, Gerardo, Portia, and Khan. Also, there's been some progress made in terms of our recommendations to improve behavioral health services. So students now have available behavioral health services through telemental health, utilizing UIC's Resilience Center. So students now have access to Black and Brown therapists. And we have been, and they can access these therapists through our Student Health and Wellness Center. And we've been actively involved in conversations with our Student Health and Wellness Center in identifying therapists to provide in-person behavioral health services as well as programming. In terms of addressing the basic needs of our students, we have been actively engaged in conversations with local partnerships with Rock River Valley Pantry, and have now created a food cupboard that's located by our student lockers on our campus. And we're starting there, and as our campus opens up and students are able to utilize this type of a service, we are also going to continue assessing the needs so that we can expand as necessary. And we've also been engaged with several organizations to develop restorative justice circles. So this really provides training on how to have a respectful, productive conversation about sensitive issues such as racism, discrimination, and bias. how to build partnership and team and build compassion and support and have constructive conversation, civil discourse around these type of topics. And I just want to highlight that Deans Blevins and Richards have been actively involved with this work. And then we have made some strides in terms of research opportunities for our underrepresented minority students. So I want to highlight that Dr. Gomez have been, and Dr. Gomez is the interim director of research for our Office of Research. And he has been working to develop the UICOM, our Underrepresented Minority Students in Research program. And this program would provide our students a funded opportunity to engage in basic clinical, community, and or translational research projects. This program would provide students mentorship by experienced researchers and principal investigators. And he's really helped move this initiative along. So we just really want to, we're really excited to share the work that the Ad Hoc Committee on Diversity and Inclusion has been involved in and developing these recommendations. And it's so nice to see that we're, making some progress and will continue to make progress on these endeavors. I wanted to acknowledge and just thank all of the members of the Ad Hoc Committee. Many of these members served on multiple subcommittees. And so we're just going to list the subcommittees here. And I want to give an extra thank you to our Medical Student Council, as well as our Student Committee of Diversity and Inclusion, who was actively involved through this process as well. As you can see, it really does take a village, and we're looking forward to providing those updates in the future to improve diversity and inclusion on our campus.
Thank you all for your time, and our contact information is available if you have any follow-up questions here. Thank you.
Thank you.